One of the biggest opportunities with Claude Skills is the ability to turn finance knowledge, workflows, and reporting standards into reusable systems. Now, the challenge is that many finance professionals understand what they want a skill to do, but it's often less clear what separates a skill that produces reliable, executive-ready outputs from ones that just don't. So in this video, I'll break down the exact framework behind high-performing finance skills, and as an example, build 3 finance skills from scratch, and in this case, covering how to pull a company's existing knowledge into a reusable analyst, how to combine multiple skills into a CFO-level reporting workflow, and how to turn a workflow that you already run manually into a skill Claude can repeat for you at will. Now, by the end of this, you'll understand exactly how to structure skills that can be applied across any of your finance workflows. And if you want the prompts and the data sets from this video, they're all in my free community, and the link is in the description below. For now, let's get into it. What Claude Skills actually are. Now, before we build anything, it is worth being clear on what skills actually are, because the most common mistake here is treating them as prompts. Now, a prompt tells Claude what to do once inside a single conversation, and when that conversation ends, then the instruction disappears. A skill teaches Claude how to perform a process, and that process is available every time you need it. Now, the skill lives inside a folder as a skill file, and that file contains everything Claude needs to execute the workflow, what triggers it, what the objective is, the steps to follow, the rules to apply, and what the output should look like. So you connect the folder to Claude code or a project, and from then that point on, the skill is live. Now, most skills fail for the same reason. They are a prompt saved as a file and nothing more. Someone writes something like, analyze this P&L and explain the results, and then they get an answer that's pretty decent the first time, and then they save it and they call it a skill. Then the next month the data changes, the assumptions change, and the answer comes out different. And nothing about how to think through the review was ever captured, so the result can't be trusted to be repeated. So the fix is structure. A skill that performs is built around 5 components, and getting those 5 right is what separates a skill that holds up from a prompt that happened to work once and then won't work again. And that is what we'll walk through next. 5 components of a high-performing finance skill. Once you can see these 5 inside any skill, you can then build one for any finance workflow you run, which is the whole point of this video. Now, the first is the trigger. It tells Claude when to run the skill. And this is the one people overlook the most, because a skill can be built perfectly and still sit there unused if Claude never knows the right moment to fire it. Now, a good trigger spells out what should activate it, the kind of request, the keywords, and the type of file that lands. Now, for a month-end review, well, that means it activates when you upload a monthly P&L, or when you ask for a variance analysis, or when you request board commentary. Now, the second is the objective. It defines the end result that the skill is built to produce. So for a variance skill, the objective is to turn raw numbers into executive-ready insights or commentary, risks, and a clear set of actions. Now, a sharp objective is what tells Claude and you what a finished output should be. Now, the third is to do with the process. Now, this is the workflow Claude follows to reach the objective, and it is where most of the intelligence in a skill lives. Now, a weak skill just says, analyze the results, and leaves everything else to chance. A strong one, on the other hand, lays out exactly how the analysis runs, the order of the steps, where the decisions get made, and how to prioritize what really matters. Now, in finance, the process is usually what decides whether the output reads like a junior analyst or an experienced finance lead. Now, the fourth is the context. Now, this is the knowledge Claude leans on while it works. The reference files, the company standards, the reporting frameworks, the past examples. Now, without it, Claude will just fall back on general knowledge, and then the output comes out as generic. But with it, Claude follows the company's own approach. And this is why a serious skill keeps reference files next to the main one so that the knowledge is there to load the moment it is needed. The fifth is the rules. Now these are the boundaries, what Claude should always do, what it should never do, and how the output has to hold up. Now in finance, that means applying a materiality threshold. It means refusing to invent a number that is not in the data and tying every conclusion back to something traceable. Now rules are what keep a skill consistent from one run to the next, and they stop it drifting away from the job that it was built for. So that's the framework. Trigger, objective, process, context, rules, and all in that order. It does not change from one skill to the next. The only thing that changes is how you create the skill in the first place. So now that you have the framework, here are 3 examples of putting it to work, each starting from a different place. Skill 1, Finance Analyst Copilot. The first skill is a Finance Analyst Copilot, and it takes your company's existing documents and turns them into a reusable monthly reviewer that knows your business, your reporting standards, and your KPI definitions before you give it a single instruction. Most finance teams already own everything a strong skill needs. The strategy decks, the board packs, the document that describes how monthly review runs go, the reporting standards. It's just scattered across files and people. So this method takes that material and turns it into a skill so that you're not documenting the process from scratch every time. And to build it, I create a folder called SkyBridge Data and place the source files inside it. And these files together describe how the finance team operates. The strategy deck covers the business model and priorities. The SOP defines how monthly reviews, variance analysis, and executive reporting should be performed. And the historical report shows what good output looks like. I open a Claude code session. I set the SkyBridge data folder as the working directory, and then I select my model. Opus 4.8 for a build like this because it's reading and synthesizing across 6 documents before generating anything. I then give Claude a single instruction: review all files, learn how this finance team operates, and build a finance analyst copilot skill that can replicate their monthly review process. Claude reads every document before writing a single line of the skill. It works through the review process first to understand how the team operates, and then it pulls the company model, the KPI definitions, and the reporting style out of the rest. Now from that, it builds the skill. Now what Claude builds is a skill folder, a main skill file with 5 reference documents sitting alongside it. Now the cleanest way to see why it holds up is to look at it against the 5 components. The trigger activates the skill whenever someone runs a monthly review or performs a variance analysis, drafts CFO commentary, or uploads a monthly P&L. The objective is written as a clear standard. Every material variance has to be identified, quantified, explained, assigned an owner, and connected to a future business implication. Now the process is an 8-step review that validates the input first, then works through variances, segments, KPIs, forecast, and risk. Now the context is the 5 reference files Claude wrote, covering the company model, the financial baselines, the variance and KPI frameworks, and the reporting standards. And the rules hold quality in place, never working from an unreconciled close, never inventing a missing number, and keeping an audit trail under every conclusion. Now, once the skill is saved, I start a completely new session to test it. I attach a new monthly finance package and use /Finance Analyst Copilot to trigger it with a short instruction to run the monthly review. Now, before it writes any commentary, Claude validates the data. The skill tells it to check the numbers against the company's own standards first, and then it catches 2 problems right away. Net income does not match between the executive snapshot and the income statement. There's a gap of 1.31 million, and EBITDA was calculated without adding back depreciation and amortization, so the figure was understated. Now both get flagged before any analysis begins. Then it produces the full review, around 12 pages. Now the main finding is that the revenue shortfall sits in the pharma logistics segment while e-commerce runs ahead of plan. Now for each material variance, it quantifies the impact, it names the driver, and it carries it through to what it means for the forecast. It also raises customer concentration in the pharma segment as a risk worth putting in front of the board, and all of that came out of the document that the company already had on a drive. Skill 2, CFO Monthly Review Generator. The second skill is a CFO Monthly Review Generator, and it takes raw monthly actuals, budget, and prior period data and produces a complete executive review package. Now the method here is combining skills that already exist into one that does exactly what you need. And this is what you reach for when good skills are already out there, but none of them does the whole job alone. So for a monthly CFO review, the pieces exist in 3 separate skills. One does variance analysis, one generates financial statements and reporting, and one handles presentation structure. So it's the kind that you would use for a board deck, for example. And each covers part of the job, but none produces a full executive review on its own. I open a new Claude session and I give it one instruction. I point it at the 3 skills: variance analysis, financial statements, and pitch deck. I then tell it to study all 3, take the highest value parts of each, and build one standalone skill for monthly executive reporting. Claude studies all 3 skills and builds one combined skill from the strongest parts of each. And here is that skill against the 5 components. The trigger activates it for monthly close reviews, CFO reviews, and board prep, or whenever a monthly P&L with budget and prior period comparisons comes up. Now the objective is to turn monthly actuals, budget, prior month and prior year into one executive ready review package. And the process is a 7-phase workflow that validates the input, filters down to the variances that matter, decomposes the drivers, and assembles the executive package at the end. Now the context is 3 reference files, the variances methods, the output templates, and the presentation outline. And the rules enforce the standards. The executive summary always leads, materiality decides what gets investigated, and every material variance has to carry an impact, a driver, and an action. I review it, I click Save Skill, and then I install it. Now to test the skill, I start a new session and attach a monthly finance package for Skybridge Logistics. I use /CFO Monthly Review with a short instruction to analyze the package and prepare the executive review. During the validation phase, Claude identifies a discrepancy. Now, the operating expense line items total $2.29 million, but the reported total shows $2.19 million, so a $100,000 gap that directly affects EBITDA and net income. Now, rather than proceeding, it flags the issue as a material data integrity concern and incorporates it into the review output. The analysis connects revenue outperformance to enterprise customer wins and expansion sales. It traces margin pressure to AWS infrastructure costs and onboarding activity. It identifies that elevated operating expenses reflect deliberate investment in sales and marketing rather than uncontrolled spending. The executive summary leads with business implications. Revenue growth exceeded expectations while profitability weakened due to infrastructure costs and accelerated growth investments. And then the board deck follows the same traceability chain as the written report and outputs 11 structured slides. Skill 3, month-end variance analysis assistant. The third skill uses a different creation method, demonstrating the workflow yourself and having Claude reverse engineer it into a reusable skill. Now this is the most practical method for finance professionals because most FP&A workflows rely on judgment and experience rather than documented procedures. And the expertise exists but has never been written down in a way that a system can actually follow. Month-end variance analysis is exactly that kind of process. Every experienced FP&A manager knows how to run it, but the prioritization logic, the driver decomposition, the risk assessment, the executive communication, those all live usually in the analyst's head. And translating that into a reusable skill manually is hard. Demonstrating it once and letting Claude extract the structure is much faster. I open a new Claude session. I upload a monthly management reporting package for a company called North Star Foods and run the full review process step by step using constrained prompts. Now, the first prompt asks Claude to identify only the material variances and to establish a materiality threshold before reviewing any line items. Revenue, COGS, gross profit, operating expenses, EBITDA, and net income come through. Smaller variances are filtered out. The second prompt instructs Claude to explain the business drivers behind each material variance, to separate temporary factors from ongoing ones, and to assess whether each variance represents a risk or an opportunity. The third prompt asks Claude to convert those drivers into a prioritized list of risks and opportunities, each with a severity level and an assessment of whether the issue is short-term or structural. Now, the fourth asks for management commentary written in a CFO to executive style, organized around business themes rather than line items. And the fifth produces the executive summary, 3 high priority insights written for an audience that may only read that section. And then the sixth generates recommended actions, each one tied directly back to a specific variance and driver already identified. Once the full analysis is complete, I ask Claude to review everything it just did and document the workflow as if it were teaching another FP&A analyst how to run the same review manually. Now, this reverse engineering step extracts the decision logic, the sequence of prioritization, the reasoning patterns, and the quality controls that appeared throughout the process. I then ask Claude to take that documented workflow and build it into a reusable skill called Month-End Variance Analysis Assistant. The instruction is clear. Build it from the workflow and the decision-making process, not from the North Star Foods outputs. And the skill needs to work for any company, any industry, and any monthly package. Laid against the 5 components, this skill leans hardest on the process. The trigger activates it for month-end reviews, variance analysis, and board prep, or whenever a monthly package with comparatives is produced. Now, the objective is to turn that package into a structured executive review built on an analyst reasoning, even ending in recommendations. Now, the process is the chain that we just ran. Material variances lead to drivers. Drivers lead to risks and opportunities, and those lead to commentary. Commentary then informs the executive summary, and everything flows into recommendations. Now, the context is the monthly statements with their budget and prior period comparisons, plus any business notes and supporting schedules. And the rule that holds it all together is traceability. Now, no conclusion is allowed unless it ties back to a specific variance and specific driver. To test whether the skill actually transfers, I open a completely new session and attach a finance package for a SaaS company called Nova Cloud Analytics. I use /month-end variance analysis assistant with a short instruction to run the review. And it follows the same process it learned, and it catches a problem in the package straight away. The KPI notes claim a 76.2% gross margin and an 18.4% EBITDA margin, but the actual P&L supports a 66.3% gross margin and a negative EBITDA. It also finds a note claiming sales and marketing came in under budget when the statement shows the opposite. Now, the reasoning carried over to a business it had never seen. From there, it runs the full chain. Revenue beat budget by $13,000, but cost overruns in cost of revenue, and operating expenses wiped out the gain, so EBITDA missed. It traces the drivers, raises customer concentration and cloud cost inflation as the main risks, and then lands on recommendations that each tie back to something it found. It finishes with an 11-slide board pack and one slide is given over entirely to the reconciliation issues it caught, flagged for the room before the number gets disclosed. And the same logic holds from the first variance through to the final recommendation. So that is 3 ways to build a finance skill, from documents your company already has, from skills that already exist, and from a workflow you run once and let Claude rebuild into a system. And the same 5 parts sit behind every one of them. The only thing that changed was the starting point. Now, if you want the prompts and the data sets from this video, they're in the free community, which is linked in the description, and I'll see you next time.